Game World Immersion.
So, hello everyone, I'm Toby from Sedgemoor FM. I'm on a placement for my college course for work experience, and today I'll be interviewing the wonderful Andy. So, Andy,
Thank
what
you for
made you
having
get
me.
into music creation?
I sort of grew up with music. It's sort of in the family. Three generations of musicians. Dad was a drummer, mum was a singer. Both my granddads, played keyboard, organ, stuff like that. So music's kind of been there since I was a kid. And I picked up the guitar when I was 11, something like that. And it was my instrument, just sort of
Yeah,
that
definitely.
feeling. You could pick the instrument up. Um, yeah, and from there it just went sort of started writing songs, and one thing led to another, and then ended up making stuff for games. And yeah, I love it. It's fantastic.
Cool. So, what actually made you, be influenced to make game like music for video games?
I think I'm gonna get a little bit pretentious with this answer, but I feel like it's one of the few places today in our society where music can really just sort of take you away to another place, if that makes sense. And I think a lot of the itch that a lot of classical music sort of scratched way back when is now being scratched by game music and film music for a lot of people, I think. And for me, playing games like Skyrim and listening to the soundtrack on that, or Oblivion, its predecessor, and games like that, it sort of made me realize there's more to game music than it's just nice music. It's another character in the game.
Yeah,
It's
it
another
brings a
adds
lot of
another.
nostalgia for people as well that have obviously played the game ages ago, which have had music, and there's quite a lot of emotional connection with that, I think. Because I
Yeah.
know that a couple of old games that I've played, and it's sort of, you get the whole memories sort of flooding back to you, don't you? Because obviously,
Yeah.
whether you're playing on you by yourself or with other people, obviously it does kind of bring all of that together. So
Mm.
what would you say, like, what your favorite like song or track that you've made for a video game, or have just purely just made for fun?
That's tough. I mean, so the thing is, whatever I've made that I've finished and liked tends to be my favorite, like whatever the latest is.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a few that I've put up that they're not video game music, they're just songs that I've put up on Spotify, which I really like recently. But then there's a few more sort of fantasy tracks that I did for a game called Emberlight that stand out, especially the main theme for that. But the ones that really take the cake for me at the moment are the ones I've been doing for a game called Tritone, which they're mostly electronic uh, tracks, and the scope for what you can do with a game like that, because it's there's an element in the game where there's organic technology within the story of the game, and so trying to translate that into music and create music that sounds like tech that's alive, that's fun. So I've really enjoyed playing around with the different the directions you can take that in. You get in a sort of mad scientist mode a little bit with a game like that, with a soundtrack like that. So for me, yeah, the stuff I've been working on for Tritone lately has been my favorite, I think, at the moment. Ask me again in a few months, and I think a different answer. But I'm loving that at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds cool. How many like soundtracks have you done for video games now?
Oh, I've done so when you're working with indie games, sometimes you don't get to do the full soundtrack, you just get to do a few tracks here and there. But full
Yeah.
soundtrack, I think this is the third full soundtrack I've done.
Oh,
Although there were a
nice.
few tracks in this one that there were a few tracks on this one that were already there before I was brought on board. But that's the thing with indie games. There's budget's always a question, so it's what they can afford and how it works. And so sometimes they bring you on to do a full soundtrack, sometimes it's just a few here and there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite cool actually. What would you say is your favorite like video game of all time? Very, very controversial
Um,
question, I know, but there's got to be
yeah.
one out there which you're just kind of like, that's cool.
So for me, I mean, I'm a massive fan of RPGs. RPGs are that's where it's at for me. So it's probably a close tie between the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, which is the older sibling of Skyrim, just because it's for me it's the perfect game in so many ways, but at the same time, it's so bad it's good, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
It's just
Well, it's been out for quite a
fantastic.
long time now, hasn't it?
It's
So
been out a long time, yeah.
yeah,
So, and you can tell it's very dated when you play it, but there's just something about it. It's brilliant and it's messy and it's Bethesda at their best, I think. But then also Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, which is another old game. And they're at the moment they're remaking, they've sort of redone the first one, and you can get it on your phone now rather than it just being a computer on a
oh
computer,
cool,
you know.
yeah,
But the soundtrack for Knights of the Old Republic 2, it's just incredible. And the story for the first one and the second one as well. The story of the first one was just generally considered to be just a fantastic twist in that story. I won't give anything away. I know it's old, but I won't give anything away to anyone that hasn't played it. But for me, the second one is where it was at. The introduction of the sort of grey element in the light side and the dark side of the Force, and how that's really explored in that game. Yeah, I just love it. It's Oblivion and KOTOR 2. Those are my all-time favorites. Yeah.
nice. Would you say that when you're making music, have you got a certain sort of like style or like a trend that you kind of make music for, or is it just like a broad range of whatever sort of project you're going for?
Well, I think when you're making video game music, you have to really listen to whatever it is that the developer wants you to do. So
Definitely.
obviously different composers have different strengths. They have different sort of niches, if you like, that they do more of or they do better than other things. So if I'm brought on for something, they've listened to the stuff I've done before and they know what to expect from me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But really a large part of it is trying to understand the creative vision of the developer, because especially with indie developers, this is quite often something that they care a lot about in the way that you don't quite get that with the bigger games. I don't think obviously there's people that care about it, but
There's
this
a
is
lot
usually
more
a small
passion
team.
with the smaller teams, isn't there?
Exactly,
Because
yeah.
obviously they're doing it as
Exactly.
part of like a passion project rather than obviously
Yeah.
massive companies trying to just, basically like get as much money as they possibly can. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
exactly. There is that passion. They care a lot about it. I think that's the right word, passion. So because of that, it's important when I come into the picture, because the music tends to come quite late in the development process anyway. So a lot of it's already done. What I need to be able to do is respect their creative vision and, as best I can, create music that supports it and, where possible, sort of elevates it. Where necessary, elevates it a little bit. So there's a lot of asking loads of questions to try and get inside the head of the developer or development team in general, and get a real sense for what they're going for with the game. And then that's what I'll draw from creatively, you know. But I like doing orchestral stuff. That's always good fun. It's always a challenge. But for me, my favorite stuff is when you can just sort of go in any direction. They just sort of say, look, this is what we want, bring in a bit of this, bring in a bit of that, but yeah, just create something around this sort of area. They give you like a ballpark, and then from there you can just
cool. So
do
you do
whatever
get
comes
quite a lot of
along.
freedom for the kind of thing that you want to do then, rather than them just setting it
It
straight.
can my ideal clients, my ideal games to work on are the ones where you get enough freedom that you can sort of explore, but enough limitations that you can be creative within that. Because anyone who's creative will tell you that if you have no limitations, you never get anything done. It just won't happen. You just go in a million directions and then you never have one to go in. You never pick one. But if you've got some sort of constraints on what you can do, that's when you can be your most creative. So my ideal games are the ones where, yeah, you get a lot of scope, but they still know what they want, and they can tell you what they want. The worst times is when there's that communication error and they don't really know what they want, and you don't really know how to give them what they want, and then it ends up being quite a difficult process, So ideally, the best times are when everyone knows what they want, but they also trust your creative vision, if you like, trust your own creative touch within the constraints that are necessary for the game, if that makes sense.
Have you ever had it where a company has just been like, nah, we don't like this whatsoever, or have they been pretty lenient on what you've created?
Thankfully, most times when I deliver something, the response has been pretty positive. The best responses are when they say, well, now I need to make the thing I was making even better because it needs to support this thing that you've just made. That I live for those moments. That's when I know I've done my job well. But yeah, there are times when you deliver something and the client goes, do you know what? It wasn't really what I had in mind, or can we change this? Can we change that? And part of my process when I'm writing anyway is to make sure that there's a stage in that development where they've got an initial version of something, so they can then say to me, look, I either like this or I don't. I like the direction you're going in or I don't. Or, as is usually the case, I like this, but can we just change this thing, that thing, or that thing, And then I can just take that away, go apply what they've said, and then finish the track off and give them the final version. But yeah, there's times when they're not best pleased, but thankfully that's quite rare, which is good to know that, generally I can, leave.
Yeah, it's definitely good to hear that, people do enjoy your work. I think that's probably one of the worst things that can happen. But yeah. So what's the kind of thing that you enjoy doing out of just making stuff for video games? Or is this sort of your main thing at the moment?
Well, I like making music, to be honest. That's a big thing. For me in general, writing songs. I was just playing on the keyboard before we jumped on here, working on a song. But then also I play video games for fun as well. And I'm not always playing them going, oh, I like what they did with the music there. You have to turn that part of your brain off to actually just enjoy the game. But I've been replaying Fallout 4 the last, I don't know how long it's been now. This playthrough, it's been quite a long playthrough because there's just so much to do in the game, But yeah, and then before that, I was playing Witcher 3, and before that, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. But yeah, I love playing games as well. That's another thing. And again, I suppose it's related to the work, but like I say, you have to turn that part of your brain off to be able to enjoy it fully.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you very much for coming in. I thoroughly enjoyed this.
If you've enjoyed this episode, then why not subscribe to the channel? And if you'd like to support the channel, then please pop over to our Patreon. You'll see a link in the description.